Coming to today's webinar, Making Mind Matter. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share some tools that are really supportive in bringing forth your full self and transforming beliefs that limit that. So we're going to talk about these things and some tools today. And I'd like to start by mentioning a bit about the title, in that there's actually a double meaning. I love puns, so it was fun when I received the title for this. Making Mind Matter. In a sense, we're talking about honoring the mind as a tool, honoring its gifts, which are supportive for pattern recognition and discernment, inquiry, etc. And we don't want to allow those things to suppress our own expression. So making mind matter means looking at the mind from that place of honoring, from that place of its importance, and gratitude for it. At the same time, making mind matter means we're actually in the process of creating our reality, making mind matter, manifestation. So these tools also help clarify our vision and support the process of manifestation. So it's twofold in that way. Okay. So if you want to take a look at your worksheet, which is right here. If you have your handout with you, Neuro-linguistics. Neuro-linguistic programming, sometimes it seems like it's a really complex term, complex way of looking at things. But when you break it down into its components, you see that it's actually very clear. So neuro is talking about your thinking processes, the way you use your senses to understand what's happening around you. So this is that making mind matter component. We're looking at the value of the mind, the neurological system. Linguistic is our words, how we use language and how it influences us and those around us. So linguistics is this magic art of using language in a way that supports our full flourishing. And programming is about behavior, how we organize our ideas and reactions, and how this affects us and those around us. So programming, in other words, how our mind, how our language, and how our actions are interconnected, and how we can, using our will and our inner wisdom, allow those things to work together as an organized, functioning system of support. And below that NLP diagram is a beautiful image I found of a butterfly. And if you look at it quickly, you might not realize, but the butterfly is overlaid on top of a labyrinth. And I've always loved the labyrinth as a metaphor, because It's not a maze. It's not a maze because it's a meditation. It's not which way am I going, what's happening, oh my gosh, I know I'm on a path and I know I'm going to get to the center. And when I get to the center, I know that when I turn and I go the other direction, I'm going to find my way back out. So it's trusting the process of transformation. And that's what this image says to me. And I just thought it was beautiful and I wanted to share that with you. So thank you. I'm going to go back to my face now. Hi. So that's the first handout. The second one we'll get to in a few minutes. But first I want to talk about how we get in our own way, and that starts with talking about limiting beliefs. Before we talk about limiting beliefs, let's talk about beliefs in general. Beliefs are ideas, are constructs that are formed in the meaning-making process during life events or shortly thereafter. It's how we make sense out of what's happening. And there are different ways that these beliefs can be influenced exogenously, which means from the outside, or that the sources of these beliefs do not come from us internally. And those could be sources such as authority figures, whether that be family, institutions, society, etc. Or beliefs could come endogenously, which means from the inside, from our own inner listening and our own wisdom, whether that be listening to the somatics, the body wisdom, listening to the guidance that we receive. So a lot of the structures, the beliefs that are formed early in life are from what would be considered exogenous sources. And our personality, the structure of who we are, is built in these early formative years. So depending on our circumstances, some of the beliefs that are created are very expansive, and some of them are more limiting. The thing I need to mention about beliefs is that there is a commitment that is made to them. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, we have made an agreement on some level to abide by what those beliefs mean and how to respond in our actions, in our programming to those beliefs. So that's what we're trying to work with today, is those commitments that we've made, whether or not they're conscious or unconscious. Okay, so limiting beliefs stifle our action, our flow in some way. They prevent our fulfillment. So there's 3 types of limiting beliefs, and there's lots of ways to look at this, but this is one way that seems helpful to me. There's 3 types: hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness. So these are different categories, ways to look at limiting beliefs. And sometimes the beliefs actually cover all of these areas. So hopelessness in the sense of thinking that there's no way that this is possible. So limiting it on a very sort of overarching scale. And states of hopelessness can be very disempowering and very exhausting emotionally and energetically as well. So I have a lot of compassion for being in those loops of hopelessness. Helplessness is a sense of thinking it can be done, but for some reason, I can't do it. I don't have the capacity to do it. So helplessness is like, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't have the skills, things like that. So limiting beliefs related to capacity and worthlessness. Yes, programming that has worthlessness as a foundation is also, very, my heart goes out to that, and I struggle with that myself as well, feeling worthy and feeling valued and valuable. Um, so that is one way to look at different types of limiting beliefs. So these language patterns, these thoughts that say, I'm not good enough, or there's no way that that's possible, or whatever. And usually they're very specific and they're related to certain aspects of our lives based on our own experiences, quote unquote, evidence based, right? Um, these patterns create reinforcing loops, which then create this program that's constantly running and self-reinforcing. Some people call this self-sabotage. I don't tend to like that term because it has a blaming tone to it. And I really want to look at this in terms of structures that served at some point. Like I said in my other video, um, what's your story? You know, the reason that these beliefs are in place and that these sort of structures were created were based on very real experiences at the time for us, and were very valid and very creative ways for psyche to manage difficult circumstances. So making mind matter to me is about honoring those defenses and honoring the structures that were put in place at that time. And just knowing now that, like, okay, so we're at a point where those no longer function, that we've outgrown them. So these limiting beliefs just, they don't fit anymore. And that's okay. It's time to change them, right? Perfect. So how we do that, excuse me, like a sip of water here. Got dehydrated. Reframing. Reframing is a phenomenal tool. Neurolinguistics really kind of broke it down and worked with it in a lot of different ways, but it's a tool that people use all the time. It happens, and it's a way of working with story, and making things make sense in new ways. So it's just, neurolinguistics has really taken it up as one of its foundational tools and really given us a lot of insight into working with it. So what's a frame? If we're going to reframe, we have to know what a frame is. A frame is a perspective, right? So it's the beliefs, the constructs about our reality, self, other, our roles, our capacities, and this is related, like we said, to those limiting beliefs. So who I think I am in the context of whatever the circumstances are, and with or without whoever or whatever is involved in that setting. Okay, so the frame is the context. And the way that I see that and my involvement in it. So one thing I need to mention about reframing, and I think it's a really valid concern, and it happens to the best of us. Reframing is not spiritual bypass, okay, when done in an integrated way. It's not just putting on rose-colored glasses and pretending like everything's okay when it's not. Or it's not naivete, you know? Um, it's actually an active practice of consciously shifting our energy and mindset around a circumstance that we're in. Okay, so even though reframing can be used in those ways, my intention here is to step into the practice of reframing from an awareness of those sort of blind spots so that we can avoid them. And that's what I like to do with all the tools that I work with, knowing that sometimes, things can be tricky, and really wanting to um, acknowledge that. Acknowledge that sometimes the defense mechanisms want transcendence, escape. And that's also worthy of honor. Sometimes fight or flight, sometimes flight is the right answer in certain circumstances. But in this case, what we're talking about here in terms of reframing is actually looking at something head on, looking at the reality of it, and trying to see how it can be useful, right? Making the best out of the circumstances. So it's a very active and empowering role to be in. Okay, there's two types, two main categories, although there are others. You can break it down in a lot of different ways, but the main way that I like to look at it is content reframe, which is the meaning, and context reframe. So content reframe is the meaning that we attribute, to a certain behavior or event. So when we have a content reframe, we have an opportunity to look at something and say, is that really what that means? Ask the question, is that true? So the questions that we ask to work with a limiting belief in terms of content reframe is, what else could this mean? Which in and of itself is a really powerful question. What else could this mean? Right? And in what way could this be positive? So, for example, feeling like let's say I feel like I'm exhausted and I don't have the energy to do my midterm paper. I feel like, oh, I just can't do this. And that is what type? Do you remember? Okay, that's helplessness, right? Okay, so let's look at that limiting belief. Is it really, the meaning behind that is that you're exhausted. So really what you're saying is that, oh, self-care, it's really important. And I really want to have the energy to give good quality to this work, right? So in what way could that be positive? To really look at, the fact that you need rest to be able to function. And in what ways then could what would be a limiting belief actually turn into a motivation for honoring your time and doing self-care? Context reframe. This one is different, and I like it because it really flips it on its head. And that trickster part of me really enjoys just that switch, that can happen. So identifying where, in what situation a behavior or event would be useful. So this is cool. In what context or situation can this have value or be useful or be used as a resource? So let's use another example. In class, someone's blurt something out, and I'm thinking, oh, I couldn't do that. I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want to be rude, right? So the limiting belief is that I can't speak up. I don't have value enough, right? So in what situation or behavior or event would that be useful? Humbleness, humility, right? This is a tricky one because there's a place for being able to speak our truth, and there's a place for honoring silence. So looking at those two things, it's about appropriateness of timing and knowing your audience, right? So thinking that I can't take up space is a limiting belief, but thinking I know when and where to take up space so that I can be the most effective, that's a context to be aware of. So in the in-person workshop, when we're doing reframing, we're going to discuss the more advanced sleight of mouth reframing skills, which is amazing. And for those of you who are not going to be able to be in the Bay Area for an in-person workshop, I can also do video chats. I can do sessions on the internet in that way. So we could always go over reframing skills, reviewing content and context, and doing sleight of mouth in a one-on-one way as well, or further webinars. So reframing is a way to look at the situation that you're in. Realize that there is a lot of information to be gleaned from what could maybe only be seen in one way from the beginning, but then when it's expanded, you can see not only the benefits, but you can see the productive actions that then can come out of that. Like we said, for the first example, self-care, honoring the need for quiet time and rest and relaxation, to be able to give fully to the projects that we pursue. And in the second example, looking at knowing our audience and knowing in what ways can we be the most effective using discernment for that context. So those are two really good examples. We could do lots of examples, and think for yourself as well, as you're working with this material, about some examples of limiting beliefs, maybe one from each category, and see how those can be reframed. Okay. The next step is manifesting the vision, making mind matter. So when we come from that place of a more expanded vision of who we are, we can then be in the flow to bring forth our gifts, our message, our art, whatever it is that our gifts are in the world, So manifesting means being in alignment with our inner self, with our high self, with the truth of who we are, right? So it's will and action, but this will is connected to that deepest source of balance and wholeness and compassion, right? So it's not an ego-based type of, I want this, I want that, here's my list, Santa Claus, bring me my, gifts in that way, although it can be. What I'm talking about is manifesting things that abundance can provide for you to be in your full expression. So if that list of things that makes you feel yummy and comforted and taken care of, if those things are necessary for you to feel good in your life, then feel free to give yourself permission to enjoy life. For me, this is a big lesson, you know, knowing it's okay to receive. It's okay to be taken care of, to take care of myself, to get what I need. So, manifestation can deal with those resources, you know, resourcing oneself in a lot of different ways. It can also be creation of the expression of the universe through you. So it's about what we're bringing in and what we're putting out, right? So it's this flow. Manifestation is about a flow of the universe moving through us, okay? So making mind matter means that the mind is a gatekeeper. When it's connected to our deepest selves and our heart and our soul in that way, then what comes through us and forth from us is naturally going to be of the highest good for ourselves and those we come into contact with. So that's a way that makes me feel really grounded when talking about manifestation. Knowing that when I tune into my inner guidance, when I look at myself and my life from this expanded perspective of capacity and abundance and gratitude, that I know that whatever needs to come forth through me, when I'm coming from that place, what manifests then is truly art, life as art. So when we talk about manifesting the vision, being a visioneer is about staying true, making a commitment, like we were talking about making commitments to beliefs, the commitment to the belief that it's possible for what it is that you have in your heart to manifest. So making a commitment means having trust and trusting the process of unfoldment and the timing of that everything unfolds in its own timing, and trusting the process for that. So in neuro-linguistics, we talk about well-forming an outcome. So well-forming an outcome means creating an intention statement that can be really effective. So taking into consideration different factors that will allow for the manifestation of that intention to be more smooth. And it's done by looking at it in a lot of different ways, from a holistic perspective, and from a perspective internally. So the way that I've applied well-formed outcome for this webinar and in my own work is what I've called the self-care intention statement. And that is because for me as a practitioner, and just in my constitution, self-care is really, really foundational. And I feel like it's a really supportive way to create intention. But the tool and the structure that I've laid out for the self-care intention statement can be like X intention statement. Do you know what I mean? So it can be in any area. We're just going to go ahead and do it in terms of self-care, because I find that really, really important when we're trying to manifest in the world. We want to have the energy and the internal and external resources to be able to do that. You know, we don't want to burn out. Not that I know anything about that. So, okay. So if you want to take a look at your second page of your handout, that will be the self-care intention statement. So let's go ahead and do that together. Okay. So here we go. And you'll see that logo at the top. It's very legitimate. Okay, so self-care intention statement. Like I said, it's derived from the Neuro-linguistics well-formed outcome. The first thing we want to do when we make a well-formed outcome is to state it in the affirmative. In other words, we don't want to say what we don't want. We want to say what we do want. And there's a lot of reasons why, you know, people have said this, oh, the unconscious doesn't hear no, etc., whatever. That I don't know. I haven't really asked it if that's true. But what I do know is that when I focus on the energy of making something happen, moving towards something, as opposed to away from something, that magnetism of that future experience of it being real is like it's a telos, it's a force that's magnetizing me to it. So stating it in the affirmative is a really great place to start. So the second thing is, and do this for yourself too, if there's a specific area of self-care that you want to work on, whether it's getting enough sleep, like we were talking about before, nutrition, drinking enough water, or something related to spiritual practices. There's so many areas of self-care that can be included in this, and you can use this structure over and over again in all of these different areas of self-care. So yeah, feel free to just pick one of these to start with, to kind of give yourself an example. So the second thing is, what is the context? We were talking about context reframing, right? So what is the context? It's really important that we know what we're talking about in terms of the context. So who, what, where, when, why, right? All of these things. What is the context for what you're trying to bring forth? Okay. The third thing is that it needs to be able to be initiated and maintained by you. Okay. In other words, you trying to manifest something that is dependent on another person for it to happen isn't as simple as choosing something that you can do for yourself. And in fact, it can draw a little bit of energy and power away from the focus of the manifestation for yourself, because we can't control other people. I mean, we can't, control is a strong word. We can't always manage everything that's going on around us, right? Although we'd like to sometimes. Okay. So number 4 is really interesting. It's really powerful, and it might take a little time to kind of dig through and find out what this is for you. Identify any positive byproducts of the current situation. Okay? In other words, A, are there benefits you receive by not following the self-care intention statement? And if so, include those to be sure it's in alignment. This this is a way of looking at some of the reasons that we stay in the positions that we're in the states that we're in. Why? What is it about not doing these things that draws us? So those are needs too that are being met. So we have to consider those needs in terms of doing the work of manifestation. And as a side note, there is a tool also in neurolinguistics that we could work on in the workshop called parts work. And they also use this in drama therapy and gestalt work and things like that, where there's parts of us that want to stay where we're at, and there are needs that are being fulfilled by those parts. So doing parts integration helps us understand why things are not going forward, or what we think might be forward at a given time, because it's possible that there might be unmet needs in other areas that are being met by staying where we're at. So noticing that. So number 4 is really important. Okay, number 5, how will you know when you're doing your SCIS? Describe the results with all the senses. This is like a form of sort of immersion. So it's like a visualization technique of imagining yourself in the state, in the context, when you're doing that for yourself, when you're taking care of yourself in a really good way in that particular area. What will it feel like to have that fresh meal from the local organic farmers market? Or what will it feel like to have had a really good night's of sleep, etc. So AVKOG, that's just talking about all the senses, audio, visual, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. Olfactory being smell and gustatory being taste. And those are some of the lesser known or used senses for visualization, but I think they're very powerful. And in fact, actually, they're associated with some of the most deepest structures of the brain as far as memory creation. So they're very powerful. So feeling free that we can actually use those senses to tap into those deep structures within ourselves to inform and sort of ground these intentions. So 6 is about the ecology. How will following the SCIS affect other areas of your life? So checking ecology means A, family, home environment, B, friends, C, work, D, health, body, emotions, mind, spirit. So holistically, we're looking at the whole context. What would happen to the outer world when this shift happens? How is it gonna respond, right? And it's good to be aware of that. It's good to be aware of sometimes there might be pushback, right, from circumstances and in the environment where people are resistant to change because they want to keep us where we're at, right? Or, like I said, parts of ourselves, right, that might like things the way they are. We also might want to check in with different environments where we'll be changing in. So like I said, home environment, work environment, different places, our communities, places that we come into contact with others. So it's really important to be aware of the ecology and to notice how that's changing. And as we change our inner selves, the outer world changes, just like in that Wayne Dyer quote, right? The way we look at things changes. The things themselves, right? It's actually shifting things. And it is ecological in that way. Everything is connected. And the number 7 is a really great way to kind of review and really continue to work with the intention statement, which is reviewing the benefits, right? When you follow that, what happens? What are some of the benefits? What are the results that you get from this type of self-care, right? So that's the self-care intention statement. I'm going to go ahead and close out the screen share again. Hi. So like I said, that is based on the structure of a well-formed outcome. So you can work on any kind of visioning project, whether it be for your professional life, your personal life, relationship, etc., anything. Okay, and I just chose self-care because I think it's really close to my heart. And in the workshop, in the in-person workshop at CIS in the fall, we will be doing also what's called a future self technique and meditation, which I love. That also helps continue to work with the well-formed outcomes. It's also something that can be done in the webinar, further webinars or video chat sessions with clients individually. So there's a lot of ways that these tools continue to develop, continue to unfold, and have a lot of ways to work with them. So just wanting to let everybody know that I will be offering a special for those of you that are on at the webinar here with me today. That I will be offering a 30-minute free consultation on working with these tools and areas that you might have of interest to do further work on it. And I also have a special going on, which is buy 3, get 1 free session of visioning and manifestation, Jumpstart Your Dreams. So that is a once a week session for a month to really get the energy moving forward for you. So these are some opportunities to continue to do the work. Feel free to use that worksheet and use it in different areas of your life. And feel free to contact me with any questions, comments, anything that you'd like to talk about, how this webinar landed for you, what came up for you. If there's anything that you'd like to process around that, I'm available. And just to close out, I just want to say thank you so much for being here with me today to go over these really special tools. And I'm really grateful. It's been an honor to share this with you. And I look forward to working with you in the future and sharing more about this and other modalities of being of service to help you move forward with your dreams in the world. So thank you so much and have a great day.